Hey there. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I'm after some solid advice or just need a place to let it all out. But, I guess we'll figure it out as we go. My name's Alex, I'm 27 years old, and for the last few years, I've been making a living as a full-time streamer. It's not really a topic I bring up with my folks, mainly because they just don't get it. And to be completely honest, I'm kind of okay with that. Here's the situation, though. I'm doing pretty well financially, more than enough to live a comfortable life, save some money, and, until very recently, help out my family with their expenses. My parents weren't exactly rolling in dough, and growing up, money was always kind of an issue. My dad, let's just call him Greg, had your typical 9-to-5 office gig and was always griping about how regular jobs never pay what they're worth. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my sister Emily, well, she's a bit younger than me and still trying to find her way. I'm not holding that against her. What I am holding against her is what went down a couple of nights back. You see, ever since I started pulling in some decent cash, my dad's whole vibe towards me has been off. He's never really said congrats on my success, never bothered to ask how I actually earn my money, and definitely never treated me like a grown-up who can handle things, including taking care of them. Instead, he acts like I'm some kind of bum who's avoiding getting a real job. It used to be just these annoying little comments, like, oh, must be tough playing video games all day, or, when are you going to actually do something useful with your life? But lately, it's been escalating. Last weekend, I headed over to my parents' place for a family game night. We don't have them that often, but every now and then, my mom pushes for some quality time, so I play along. I was expecting a few rounds of cards, some friendly teasing, and maybe a decent home-cooked meal if I got lucky. Instead, it became an evening of subtle, and not-so-subtle digs at me. It kicked off with my dad poking fun at how I supposedly sleep all day. I just happen to work late hours. Then my sister jumped in, saying how I never really matured. Eventually, my mom started talking about how I had all these grand plans when I was younger, as if I'm some massive letdown. I tried to ignore it, keep things chill. I've been putting up with this for ages, and honestly, I thought I was past caring. But what I didn't realize was that Emily had been secretly filming bits of the evening on her phone. A couple of days later, she uploaded the video. I wasn't even searching for it. I was just casually browsing through Instagram when I saw a notification that she'd posted a story. I clicked on it, not really thinking much of it. And there it was. A terrible low-res video of my dad leaning back in his chair, drink in hand, saying, I'm telling you, Alex has the world's easiest life. Plays his silly games, chats with geeks all day, and somehow manages to pay his bills. He could end up on the streets in a year and wouldn't even realize it. Then, the sound of laughter. My sisters, my moms, even my uncle was in the background, joining in. I swiped to the next few clips, and it was pretty much the same deal. My dad ranting about how Alex thinks he's some kind of hotshot businessman, while my mom joked about how I should actually use that computer science degree and find a real job. And my sister, she was filming it like it was some hilarious, exclusive footage. At one point, she flipped the camera to herself and whispered, with giggles, this is probably why he never has a girlfriend. Like I mentioned, I was aware they didn't really respect my job. I knew they figured I was just frittering away my life in front of a computer. But seeing them say it when they assumed I wasn't around, hearing the laughter, the taunting, the complete lack of respect, it affected me in a way I hadn't anticipated. 4 years, I'd been their safety net. I'd covered bills when they were having a tough time, I'd paid for my mom's medical bills when she had surgery last year, I even helped Emily out with cash when she was behind on her rent. And yet, here they were, making fun of me like I was some pathetic loser they had to put up with. I shut down Instagram, sat there for a moment, just gazing at my phone. And then, for the first time in a long time, I felt a change inside me. Because if that's how they genuinely viewed me, maybe it was time to stop being their financial support. Initially, my mind tried to rationalize their behavior. Maybe they were just kidding around, maybe this was one of those situations where people say dumb stuff in the name of family fun. Maybe I was blowing things out of proportion. But the more I dwelled on it, the more I understood, no, this wasn't just a casual, off-the-cuff joke. This wasn't some innocent family ribbing. This was pure disdain. A group of people I'd been helping out, in ways they probably weren't even aware of, sitting around and laughing about how much of a failure they thought I was. And the most infuriating part? They genuinely meant it. You can usually sense when someone's joking around. There's a certain vibe, something playful, something warm. But that video, that wasn't playful. That was my dad sitting there, confidently belittling me like it was the most normal thing in the world. That was my sister filming it because she found it hilarious. That was my mom joining in, not to stand up for me, not to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be putting Alex down like this, but to add to the mockery. I felt a tightness in my chest, a slow, simmering heat that wasn't quite fury yet, but getting there. I had the urge to text Emily right away, ask her what the heck she thought she was doing, demand some kind of explanation. But I held back. Instead, I launched my banking app. I scrolled through my recent transactions, just letting the figures really sink in. $1,500, rent for my parents' place. $600, the final chunk of Emily's car payment. $3,200, a credit card bill my dad had forgotten about. $250, groceries, from when my mom called saying they were short last month. Transaction after transaction, a silent, incriminating record of all the ways I've been their financial crutch. All the instances they'd come to me with a small favor or an unexpected expense that they just couldn't manage on their own. And for years, I'd agreed every single time. Because I genuinely wanted to help, because they were family, because no matter how dismissive my dad was, no matter how little respect they showed, I told myself I was doing the right thing. That someday, they'd realize I wasn't some lazy disappointment. But now, looking at that video, at those transactions, it dawned on me. They were never going to change their perception of me. Not unless I forced them to. I inhaled deeply, then exhaled. And then, finally, I did something I should have done a long time ago. I opened my group chat with my parents and sister. And I typed, "Hey, just saw Emily's video. Didn't know you all had such a low opinion of me." 3 little dots appeared almost immediately. My mom, typing. Then they disappeared. Then my sister started, then stopped. Finally, my dad responded, "Oh, you saw that? Come on, don't be so overly sensitive. We were just messing around." I stared at the screen. Messing around, right? Before I could reply, Emily chimed in, "Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. You know how Dad gets when he's had a few." That heat in my chest intensified. Funny, I don't recall it being a joke when you needed help with rent last month. Another pause, a longer one this time. Then, "Dude, seriously? You're getting upset over a dumb video." I clenched my jaw. This wasn't just about the video. It was about the years of being treated like a joke, even while I was the one making sure they could pay their bills, keep the lights on, and put food on the table. And they still didn't understand. So I typed one final message: "I'll make this clear. If you find my job so humiliating, you won't have to worry about it anymore. Don't ask me for a single penny." Then, before they could reply, I muted the chat. And for the first time in ages, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Of course, I knew this whole situation wasn't magically resolved. Not even close. Because if I knew anything about my dad, it was that he didn't handle losing control gracefully. And I just yanked away his favorite financial cushion. I had a strong feeling the real drama was just getting started. The initial few hours after I muted the chat were surprisingly calm. No messages, no frantic apologies, no desperate attempts to smooth things over. For a fleeting, naive moment, I almost thought, maybe they actually got the message. Maybe they finally understand. Then, around 9 p.m., my phone started buzzing. Dad calling. I ignored it. A minute later, a text, "Pick up the phone now." Then another, "Don't be a child about a simple joke." And another, "You really think you're going to stop helping us because of this? Grow up, Alex." There it was. That all too familiar tone. That blend of anger and feeling like he was entitled to something, like he deserved a conversation, like I was the one acting out of line for finally drawing a boundary. I didn't respond. 2 minutes later, Emily texted, "Dude, you're overreacting so much. Dad's furious. Just talk to him. It wasn't even a big deal." I didn't reply. Then my mom, "Alex, sweetie, please don't do this. You know your father didn't intend any harm." That one stung a bit more than it should have. Not because I believed her, but because of how predictable it was. She always did this, minimized his actions, swept things under the rug, smoothed things over just enough to maintain the status quo. I could practically hear her voice in my head, that weary, exasperated sigh she always used whenever I had the nerve to push back. "You know how he is, Alex. Just let it go." But I was finished letting it go. I was done playing along. So I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, closed my laptop, and went live with my stream. It was a pretty good stream, too. Pulled in solid viewership, had a great game, even got a few generous donations from some regular viewers. And the entire time, I kept thinking, this is my actual life. Not them. This. I should have felt completely liberated. And in a way, I did. But I also knew my dad. And I knew he wouldn't just let this slide. I went to bed around 3 a.m., completely drained, and when I woke up the next morning, the first thing I saw was my phone screen absolutely flooded with notifications. 16 missed calls, 8 from Dad, 4 from Mom, 2 from Emily, 2 from an unknown number. And then, at the very top, the one notification that made my stomach sink. My banking app. I tapped it open, already bracing myself for what I'd find. $600 withdrawal. $150 withdrawal. $350 withdrawal. I stared at the screen, my brain taking a moment to fully process what I was seeing before the realization slammed into me. They took money from me. More specifically, my parents had just cleaned out my joint emergency savings account. The account I had established years ago, the one I created back when they were having financial difficulties, when I still believed I could trust them, when I was naive enough to think that helping them would make them appreciate me. I hardly ever used it now. It was just a backup, a safety net. And they were draining it. My hands were trembling as I ripped my phone off the charger and immediately dialed my bank. "Yeah, I need to remove someone from my account," I said, barely managing to keep my voice from cracking as the customer service representative greeted me. They started requesting security information, verifying my identity, all that routine stuff, but I could hardly concentrate. My mind was spinning, a mix of fury and disbelief washing over me in waves. They genuinely believed they could do this? They really thought they could steal from me and I'd just accept it? While the representative was working, I pulled up my family group chat and, without bothering to read any of the dozens of unread messages, I sent one final text: "You just stole from me. I'm completely done." Then I blocked every single one of them. No more discussions, no more justifications, no more excuses. I was finished. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. People like my dad, they don't just back down when you take away their control. And sure enough, later that afternoon, I heard it. A loud, aggressive knock at my door. Not the casual kind, not someone stopping by for a friendly visit. This was insistent, demanding. I already knew who it was before I even looked. But still, I peered through the peephole anyway, just to be certain. And there he was. My father, standing on my doorstep, jaw set, face flushed, fist practically shaking at his side. He didn't just look angry, he looked absolutely livid. And I had a feeling this was about to escalate significantly. I stood there, gazing through the peephole, my heart racing. I wasn't frightened, at least, not in the way he intended me to be. But there was something about the way he stood there, his entire body practically vibrating with fury, that made my blood run cold. He didn't just look mad, he looked personally offended, like I had wronged him, like I was the one who had crossed a line. Another knock, even louder this time. "Alex, open this door right now." His voice was sharp, cutting, a voice I'd heard my entire life, a voice that always expected immediate obedience. He slammed his fist against the door again. "I know you're in there." I inhaled deeply, trying to figure out my next move. My initial instinct was to ignore him, let him rage outside until he got tired and left. But I knew my dad. That wasn't going to happen. He would stay, he would shout, he would escalate. And I wasn't about to have my neighbors calling the police because my father didn't know how to accept no for an answer. So, I unlocked the door. The instant I cracked it open, he pushed his way inside. I barely had time to step back before he was already in my apartment, standing in my living room like he owned the place. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded, his voice low but seething. His hands were balled into fists at his sides, his entire body taut like he was barely restraining himself. "You blocked your mother, your sister, after everything we've done for you?" I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Everything you've done for me? That was a joke." "You stole from me," I said, my voice icy. "Don't act shocked that I'm cutting you off." His face contorted into something unpleasant, a sneer twisting his lips. "Stole from you? Don't be so melodramatic. That money was for the family." I felt my fingers curl into a fist at my side. "That was my money. That I earned. That I chose to share with you when I believed you genuinely needed it." I took a step closer, refusing to let him intimidate me like he used to when I was younger. "But I'm done. I'm not your personal ATM. I'm not covering your bills. I'm not rescuing you anymore." He scoffed, shaking his head. "So that's it? You're just going to abandon us?" I felt something inside me finally break. "You abandoned me," I retorted, my voice rising. "You and Emily and Mom sat there and laughed at me. You mocked me, humiliated me, and now that you're losing access to my money, now you suddenly care." He rolled his eyes, letting out an exasperated sigh as if I was the one being unreasonable. "Jesus, Alex, it was a joke. You're really going to throw a fit over that?" I couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, bitter, disbelieving sound. "A joke? It was always a joke, when it was convenient for them." "Yeah, funny how it wasn't a joke when you were spending my money, though. Funny how you never had an issue with my embarrassing career when it was paying your rent." That was when something shifted. His expression flickered, just for a split second, just long enough for me to catch it. Uncertainty. A tiny crack in his facade. Like for the first time, it was actually sinking in how serious I was. But then, just as quickly, the anger returned. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger at my chest. "You wouldn't have that money if it wasn't for us," he spat. "We raised you. We provided for you. You wouldn't be where you are if we hadn't worked our butts off, putting food on the table for you." I let out a breath, shaking my head. "And I repaid you. 100 times over. I took care of you, I covered your expenses. I gave you everything I possibly could. And it was never enough for you." I met his gaze, my voice turning ice cold. "But I'm finished. You don't get to belittle me, steal from me, and then stroll in here acting like I owe you something." For the first time since he forced his way in, he didn't have an immediate comeback. He just stood there, breathing heavily, his face twisted in fury. But I could detect something else beneath the surface. Realization. Because deep down, I think he finally understood I wasn't making empty threats. Then, just when I thought he might actually leave, his lips curled into a smirk. "You think you're so incredibly successful, huh?" His tone was mocking now, dripping with condescension. "Think you're some big-shot internet celebrity?" I didn't respond. I just folded my arms and waited for him to get to his point. He let out a short, bitter laugh. "You think this streaming gig is going to last forever? You think you're financially secure for life? Let me tell you something, kid, you're nothing. You're a joke. You think these people watching you online genuinely care about you? The instant you stop being entertaining, the instant some younger, more talented streamer comes along, you'll be ancient history. And when that happens, he spread his arms wide, giving me that patronizing, self-satisfied grin that used to make my stomach churn as a kid, you'll come crawling back. Just like I always knew you would. I just stared at him for a long, silent moment. He truly believed that. He needed to believe that. Because the alternative, that I was actually successful, that I was actually better off without them, was something his ego couldn't process. So, I smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made his smirk falter just a bit. You really believe that, huh? I said, my voice almost amused. You really think I need you? I took a step closer, looking him directly in the eye. You have absolutely no idea how much money I actually make. And that was when I saw it. That flicker of something in his expression. Greed. Curiosity. Doubt. For the first time, he actually considered it. And that was when I knew. He wasn't here to argue. He wasn't here to make me feel guilty. He was here because he thought he could still salvage the situation. But he was about to realize he had already lost. For the first time in my entire life, I saw something I never expected to see on my father's face. Hesitation. Doubt. He wanted to believe I was bluffing. He needed to believe that I was still the same kid he could easily manipulate, that my success was fleeting, that at any second, I'd come crawling back, desperate for his approval. But he wasn't unintelligent. He had never actually taken the time to ask me about my career before, but now, standing in my apartment, my nice apartment, in a building he probably couldn't afford to rent a storage unit in, it was dawning on him. I was doing better than him. Better than all of them. And he hated it. You think you're too good for us now? His voice had lost some of its venom, but he was still trying to maintain the upper hand. You think just because you got fortunate playing video games on the internet, you don't need your family anymore? I sighed, shaking my head. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about the money. It's about basic respect. I gestured around the room. I worked incredibly hard for this. And instead of being happy for me, instead of being proud of me, you sat there and laughed. You treated me like a joke. I took a step closer, my voice low and firm. But I'm the one laughing now. His jaw clenched. You think you'll be laughing when this all crumbles? Because it will crumble. And when it does, don't come crying to us. I tilted my head, studying him. That's ironic, because I was about to say the exact same thing to you. He scoffed, but I saw the flash of uncertainty in his eyes. I let the silence hang in the air between us before I finally spoke again. You need me, I said simply. Not the other way around. His face turned red. He opened his mouth to fire back some half-hearted insult, but then his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his scowl deepened. I smirked. That mom asking if you managed to change my mind? His grip on the phone tightened. Bingo. I crossed my arms. Let me guess, since I cut you off, the bills are piling up? You've got outstanding debts? Maybe mom's been nagging you because suddenly, there's no money flowing in to rescue her from her own spending habits? Maybe Emily's panicking because she's lost her financial safety net. I let my words sink in before I delivered the final blow. How does it feel, Dad? Knowing that the embarrassing failure is the only reason you weren't completely underwater. His breathing was heavier now, his entire body tense with suppressed rage. But he had nothing to say. Because he knew I was right. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Get out. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, like he couldn't quite believe this was actually happening. Like he still thought there was a way to turn this around. You're making a huge mistake, Alex, he finally said, his voice low. Family is all you've got. I held his gaze. That's where you're mistaken. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. I wasn't seeking his approval. I didn't care what he thought. And that scared him more than anything. He lingered for a few seconds longer, maybe hoping I'd change my mind, maybe waiting for some last-minute guilt trip to take effect. But I just stood there, waiting. And finally, he turned and walked out. I shut the door behind him and locked it. Then I took a deep breath. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even sad. I just felt free. I took a moment to just stand there, letting the silence envelop me. No more guilt, no more obligations, no more bending over backward for people who never genuinely cared about me in the first place. It was over. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I knew they'd try to contact me again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, when the money ran out, when things got difficult, when they needed me again. But I wasn't going to be there. I had spent years supporting them, hoping they'd recognize my worth. But the truth was, I never needed their validation. I was successful without them. I was happy without them. And I wasn't about to let them drag me down ever again. So, what do you all think? Did I handle this situation appropriately? Would you have cut them off as well? Or would you have given them one final chance? Let me know, because honestly, I've never felt more certain about a decision in my entire life.